It all started when I began to deeply study the phenomenon of the so-called nice guys. I analyzed the stories of those very men who by the age of 50 or 60 give absolutely all their strength, resources, and health to their families. They build spacious houses, pay the bills without complaining, secure the future of the children, bring morning coffee to bed, and firmly believe in one unshakable truth. They are convinced that their boundless devotion, financial stability, and domestic compliance solidly guarantee them the sincere, passionate, and eternal love of their wives. It was during this period of my research that I came across thousands of anonymous female confessions on closed psychological forums, which completely shattered this naive male illusion. It is incredibly difficult for grown men to accept this. This truth pierces right into the vulnerable male ego like a red-hot needle. But the harsh reality is that your absolute safety and domestic predictability kill her animal instincts day after day. While you bend over backwards trying to be the perfect, understanding, and gentle partner, such explicit scenes unfold in her secret fantasies that in real daytime life she would feel unbearably and burningly ashamed of them. To understand why a perfect wife turns into an insatiable participant of group debauchery in her thoughts, we need to throw romantic comedies aside and look at the structure of her psyche through the lens of cold psychoanalysis. Imagine the ordinary life of a good woman who is over 40 or 50 years old. She is a high-class manager of her own life and the lives of all family members. She controls the schedule of the kids, monitors the health of aging parents, plans the budget, maintains impeccable order in the house, and remembers when you have an important meeting. Her brain works like an overheated processor of a huge server, making dozens of micro-decisions every second. She is in a state of permanent control. She carries a colossal weight of social and moral responsibility on her fragile shoulders. She must be friendly with the neighbors, restrained with relatives, wise with you, and endlessly patient with circumstances. And this is exactly where the fundamental law of the human psyche comes into play. The great psychoanalyst Carl Jung brilliantly described this law. It is a law that cannot be deceived or bypassed by persuasion. Jung argued that our personality is not monolithic. It is divided into the part that we proudly show to the world and the shadow, which is the dark, hidden repository of all our suppressed instincts, forbidden thoughts, and obscene desires. And the main rule of this law sounds ruthless. The brighter the light of your conscious righteousness, the thicker, darker, and more dangerous your shadow becomes. It all started when I began to deeply study the phenomenon of the so-called nice guys. I analyzed the stories of those very men who by the age of 50 or 60 give absolutely all their strength, resources, and health to their families. They build spacious houses, pay the bills without complaining, secure the future of the children, bring morning coffee to bed, and firmly believe in one unshakable truth. They are convinced that their boundless devotion, financial stability, and domestic compliance solidly guarantee them the sincere, passionate, and eternal love of their wives. It was during this period of my research that I came across thousands of anonymous female confessions on closed psychological forums, which completely shattered this naive male illusion. It is incredibly difficult for grown men to accept this. This truth pierces right into the vulnerable male ego like a red-hot needle. But the harsh reality is that your absolute safety and domestic predictability kill her animal instincts day after day. While you bend over backwards trying to be the perfect, understanding, and gentle partner, such explicit scenes unfold in her secret fantasies that in real daytime life she would feel unbearably and burningly ashamed of them. She closes her eyes while lying next to you on expensive silk sheets and sees herself not in this cozy, safe bedroom with a caring but predictable husband. She transports herself to a semi-dark, stuffy room where she is surrounded by a tight ring of several faceless, tall male figures who radiate threat and primal power. She imagines in all sensual details how she is roughly deprived of the right to choose, and how her well-groomed body instantly turns into a weak-willed instrument for someone else's aggressive pleasure. She physically feels in her thoughts how a wild, insatiable female awakens in her, greedily accepting rough male power that crashes down on her simultaneously from different sides. Her fantasy paints the weight of several hot bodies pressing her to the mattress, strange hands that uncompromisingly spread her hips, and the hoarse breathing of strangers who absolutely do not care about her inner world, her diplomas, or what a wonderful mother she is. She wants to tremble in her knees and be just a thing that is passed from hand to hand. She craves to feel a hard, unyielding grip on her wrists that leaves not a single millimeter in her head for thoughts about domestic problems. Unpaid bills and dinner. Why do decent, crystal-clear-looking women so desperately and painfully want to be corrupted and trampled in a sexual sense? Why does your endless tenderness only intensify her manic attraction to this dirty, uncontrolled chaos? Today, we will descend into the darkest, unexplored corners of female nature, into those gloomy basements of the subconscious that the great psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud warned about, where there is not a gram of social morality, but only blind animal lust pulses. I will take apart the architecture of this shocking fantasy for you, piece by piece, so that you understand how the body and mind of the woman you thought you had studied to the last mole works. But I must give you my word of honor and simultaneously warn you that the finale of this deep analysis will forever turn your understanding of marriage and female submissiveness upside down. Because the last part of this material, that very paradox of absolute power, hides a dangerous but incredibly effective secret of how exactly you can become that crushing, dominant crowd for her, without destroying your family, and without inviting strangers into the house. This final sign, this phantom of submission, is exactly why you need to absorb every word until the very last second. Because this tool will forever change your perception of your own woman and return the throne in your bedroom to you. But before we plunge into this abyss, I want to appeal to those men who are not afraid to look the truth in the eye. If you understand the value of such a tough, uncompromising, and honest look at relationships, if you are tired of vanilla advice from psychologists who teach men to be comfortable doormats for wiping feet, support this project. Become a sponsor of our channel right now and press the sponsor button, because your support is a direct contribution to the creation of independent content that tears off pious masks and shows the naked, uncombed truth about what women really want. And at the same time, so that I understand who I am dealing with, put a plus in the comments under this video if you have ever noticed that after many years of marriage, your woman begins to hide her true dark desires behind an impenetrable mask of domestic correctness. And put a minus if you firmly believe that absolute transparent frankness without a single secret reigns in your couple. To understand why a perfect wife turns into an insatiable participant of group debauchery in her thoughts, we need to throw romantic comedies aside and look at the structure of her psyche through the lens of cold psychoanalysis. Imagine the ordinary life of a good woman who is over 40 or 50 years old. She is a high-class manager of her own life and the lives of all family members. She controls the schedule of the kids, monitors the health of aging parents, plans the budget, maintains impeccable order in the house, and remembers when you have an important meeting. Her brain works like an overheated processor of a huge server, making dozens of micro-decisions every second. She is in a state of permanent control. She carries a colossal weight of social and moral responsibility on her fragile shoulders. She must be friendly with the neighbors, restrained with relatives, wise with you, and endlessly patient with circumstances. And this is exactly where the fundamental law of the human psyche comes into play. The great psychoanalyst Carl Jung brilliantly described this law. It is a law that cannot be deceived or bypassed by persuasion. Jung argued that our personality is not monolithic. It is divided into the part that we proudly show to the world and the shadow, which is the dark, hidden repository of all our suppressed instincts, forbidden thoughts, and obscene desires. And the main rule of this law sounds ruthless. The brighter the light of your conscious righteousness, the thicker, darker, and more dangerous your shadow becomes. It works like a giant psychological pendulum that cannot be stopped. If during the day she pulls this pendulum to the extreme right position of absolute holiness, morality, service to the family, and domestic piety, then with the onset of darkness, this pendulum rushes to the extreme left position with crushing force, to where absolute chaos, dirt, animal mating, and total destruction of all social taboos reign. Her consciousness, tired of endless self-control, literally howls from tension, demanding compensation. That is why the fantasy of group interaction becomes the ideal lifebuoy for her, the most powerful antidepressant that her inflamed brain can only create. Think for yourself why it is not enough for her to just imagine cheating with one stranger, even a very attractive one. Because one man, even in a fantasy, still implies a certain order and a certain structure of relationships. You need to talk to one man. You need to catch his mood. You need to somehow build communication, which means turning on your head again and controlling the process. But a crowd of faceless males requires none of the above from her. A crowd is an element, a tsunami of sweat, muscles, and testosterone that demolishes all barriers and leaves no room for small talk. When Sigmund Freud spoke about suppressed libido, he meant exactly this pressure cooker effect, where the valve is tightly closed by social norms. You as a loving husband, seeing her fatigue, bring her a warm blanket, brew chamomile tea, and tell her to rest and not think about anything. But this is the most monstrous mistake of a nice guy, because your blanket and your tea are just more attributes of that very suffocating order from which her subconscious dreams of escaping with screams. Her body does not crave peace, it craves a rough physical reset. She imagines strong male hands squeezing her throat just enough to cut off oxygen to her anxious thoughts. She imagines the weight of someone else's body pressing her into the bed, making her feel weak, helpless, and completely enslaved. In her fantasy, there are no names, no faces, and no obligations. There is only animal friction, hot skin, the smell of arousal, and absolute capitulation of her will before the superior physical force of several males. The more you try to be a home therapist and a soft pillow for her, the stronger this pendulum swings towards ruthless group debauchery. She hides these thoughts deep inside, and she might even blush if she hears a dirty joke on TV, because her conscious ego is terrified of what is happening in her own shadow. But at night, when the mask of the ideal wife slides onto the pillow, her beast, starved for wildness, goes hunting, demanding not affection, but rough, uncompromising consumption of her body without a trace. And we have only scratched the surface of this phenomenon, because next comes the oldest, most merciless biological program that is sewn into the DNA of every woman since the time of cavemen. And the way this program forces her body to react to the thought of several men will force you to reconsider everything you knew about female fidelity and physiology. And that very final paradox of absolute power, which we are inexorably approaching, will step by step reveal to you the secret of how to extract your personal benefit from this chaos. Let us put psychology, morality, and all those beautiful, noble tales that civilization has been telling us for the last few thousand years aside for a while. Let us peel off the thin layer of social plaster from this problem and look at the cold, ruthless, and absolutely amoral logic of evolution that shaped the female body millions of years ago. We naively believe that having a stamp in the passport, a ring on the finger, and a joint mortgage can magically turn off the ancient instincts that helped our species survive in the harshest conditions of the wild. But the truth is that inside your sophisticated, educated wife, who reads classic literature and carefully adjusts your collar before you leave for work, sleeps a primal female with cruel reproductive programs. In many primate species, our closest biological relatives, there is an absolutely natural strategy called polyandry, or, simply speaking, having multiple husbands. In wild conditions, when a female enters the period of maximum fertility, Her body does not look for one single most reliable male who will bring her bananas for the rest of her days. Her biological program pushes her to mate with several of the most aggressive and dominant males of the pack, and it is desirable to do this in a row with a minimum break-in time. Why did nature create this dirty mechanism from the point of view of modern morality that forces a female to literally give herself to a crowd? The answer lies in ruthless genetic selection, because the female body at the deepest cellular level does not trust external signs of male strength. Her body wants to arrange real gladiator fights at a microscopic level. It wants to collect the seed of several strong individuals inside itself, so that they enter a mortal battle in which the most aggressive and viable genetic line will win. In our modern polished world, this ancient mechanism is brutally suppressed by laws, religion, and rules of good taste. Monogamy has imposed a strict veto on it, declaring it the greatest sin. But the instinct that was forged for millions of years cannot be erased in a couple of hundred generations. It has not evaporated anywhere. It just went deep underground and hid in the darkest corners of her subconscious. It is this ancient call that breaks out when she closes her eyes and gives herself up to her most shameful fantasy of group submission. This is not the looseness of her mind. This is a desperate cry of her biological essence, which craves to receive that ultimate concentrated cocktail of pure male aggression. She fantasizes about how her body becomes a battlefield for someone else's testosterone. She imagines the smells of male sweat mixed with animal desire. She wants to feel the difference in touches and the difference in the strength of the grip of different hands with her skin. Her inflamed imagination paints pictures where she is cornered, deprived of the slightest room for maneuver, where one heavy male body is replaced by another, giving her not a second of respite, not a moment to come to her senses. She wants to be stunned by this multiple energy. She wants to get such an overdose of male presence that her body will start to tremble, because only such a prohibitive level of intensity can completely turn off her mind mixer and plunge her into a state of primal trance. And this is the most painful blow to your male ego, because you, even if you are objectively strong, successful, and good in bed, still remain only one unit of genetic material and one source of energy. You, with your calm and predictable love, simply physically cannot give her that animal overdose of chaos that her ancient program requires, and about which she dreams on sleepless nights. Her female essence, hidden behind the mask of a faithful spouse, craves competition. She wants to feel like prey that gets torn apart by a pack of hungry wolves, and not like a domestic cat that is affectionately stroked in the evenings by a single owner. I know that the realization of these processes makes blood pound in the temples, but you will find exactly this level of hard anatomical truth on our channel. We dissect reality, leaving no stone unturned from comfortable illusions. If this uncompromising approach resonates with your male core, if you are looking not for consolation, but for real knowledge about the structure of the female psyche, right now is the most correct moment to subscribe to the channel and make sure that you have all notifications turned on. Because what I tell you next will plunge us even deeper into the darkness of her desires, and that very final paradox I mentioned at the very beginning will become your only way out of this mental trap. This paradox of absolute power, which awaits us at the end, will teach you how to outsmart her biology, how to become this primal pack yourself, and how to force her to experience this animal trembling while looking only into your eyes. So do not even think about switching off, because we are approaching the most interesting part. Now, let us take a step aside from ancient biology and rise to the level of her daily self-perception. Because the fantasy of group dominance has another incredibly powerful and purely selfish engine. To understand it, you will have to look at your life together through her eyes and honestly admit the destructive effect that many years of domestic comfort have on a woman. In the routine of long relationships, when you are both well over 40, a woman inevitably begins to face the tragedy of an invisible person as she dissolves in her functions and duties. She has become a reliable mechanism for ensuring comfort. She cooks your favorite dishes. She remembers where your clean shirts lie. She listens to your problems at work and organizes vacations. But in this endless wheel of service, she catastrophically loses the feeling of her own sexual exclusivity. She ceases to feel like a desired woman and turns into a convenient element of the interior. You are used to her. Your gaze glides over her figure every day when she comes out of the shower or changes clothes for sleep. But this has long ceased to be the gaze of a hungry predator. It is the gaze of a person looking at a familiar long-read book. You might kiss her on the neck or routinely slap her on the thigh while passing by in the kitchen. But she reads not passion in this, but only the friendly disposition of a good neighbor with whom she shares children and a joint bank account. And right here in this suffocating atmosphere of domestic indifference, her dark fantasy comes onto the stage, working as a giant magnifier of her trampled female ego. In a scenario involving a crowd, she ceases to be an invisible cog in the family mechanism. She instantly and absolutely becomes the center of the universe, the bright sun around which a parade of planets lines up. Imagine this picture as she sees it, when she closes her eyes and gives herself up to her thoughts. 3 or 4 strong, aggressively minded males are in one room, and all their attention, to the last drop of lust, is focused exclusively on her alone. She is in the center, naked and defenseless, but at the same time possessing colossal power, because it is her body that makes these men go crazy, breathe heavily, and lose control over themselves. Every movement she makes, every curve of her back, and every moan is greedily caught by several pairs of eyes at once, in which she sees not the usual marital fatigue, but a burning animal desire to tear her apart right here and now. In this fantasy, no one thinks about the fact that she has to get up early for work tomorrow. No one asks her about plans for the weekend. All these men do not give a damn about her inner world. They only need her pulsing wet flesh. She feels strange, rough fingers simultaneously exploring every millimeter of her skin, and different voices whispering dirty, obscene words in her ear that you would never dare to say out loud in your clean bedroom. This is not just physical arousal. This is the most powerful narcotic injection into her starved ego. This is the most direct and undeniable proof that she is still a desired trophy. To be torn apart by male attention and to be an object of dispute and passion for several men at once is the highest form of narcissistic triumph for a woman who in real life is used to feeling like a ghost with a vacuum cleaner in her hands. In this dirty scene, she feels like the queen of the hive, the high priestess of fertility, on whose altar strong men bring their seed, their energy, and their pride. She enjoys the power that her femininity gives her. She revels in the fact that with just her appearance, she can force a group of healthy, strong males to turn into obedient animals crazed with lust, who are ready to carry out any command of her body. This is total compensation for all those years when she felt ordinary, when you fell asleep turned to the wall, and when romance slid down to rare flowers on a women's holiday. That is why this fantasy is so obsessive. It allows her to feel alive, dangerous, and incredibly attractive again. It erases years, erases wrinkles, and erases stretch marks, leaving only pure energy of total adoration. But do not rush to fall into despair, because you alone cannot provide her with this multiple adoration, because we are getting close to the darkest control mechanisms. The fact that she wants to be the center of attention of the crowd does not mean that she wants to take responsibility for this process, and the next block we will analyze will expose the most paradoxical part of her subconscious. We will talk about why she desperately craves to turn into an inanimate thing, and how her fatigue from the need to be a strong personality gives birth to the harshest forms of sexual submission. And then, after we open this abscess, I will finally hand you that very key, that very paradox of absolute power that you have been waiting for since the first minute. This tool will allow you to create in your bedroom that very illusion of multiplicity, that very atmosphere of primal siege that her body craves, turning you in her eyes into an invincible, all-consuming element from which she will not want to save herself. We have approached the darkest, most psychologically complex and paradoxical part of this female fantasy, to that aspect which most men simply refuse to understand because it completely breaks their idea of love and partnership. Modern society has instilled in us that a woman always wants to be heard, that she wants to be a full-fledged person in bed, that every touch must be agreed upon, and every breath must be a manifestation of high spiritual intimacy. And this works when you drink morning coffee or discuss buying a new car. But when night falls on the city and her suppressed shadow comes into play, all this equal democracy goes to hell. The truth is that the modern woman is sick to the point of nausea and nervous tic of being a strong, independent, and controlling personality. Every day of hers is an endless series of decision-making. She solves problems at work. She decides what the family will eat for dinner. She decides where you will go on vacation, and she works as the manager of your joint reality. And when in the evening, after this marathon of responsibility, you go to bed, and you, as a correct, sensitive, modern husband, gently stroke her on the shoulder and ask what she would like today, you are making a fatal mistake. You are forcing her to make one more decision. You are forcing her to be a person again. You are demanding that she turn on her brain, analyze her desires, and issue you technical specifications for sex today. For her overheated psyche, this is equivalent to torture. That is exactly why the fantasy that she is taken by a crowd of strange men is for her not just an erotic picture, but the most desired and deepest psychological vacation, the ultimate escape from any responsibility. In a scenario where she is surrounded by several aggressive males, she does not need to decide anything because her right to vote is simply taken away. She mentally transforms from a respected woman, mother and wife, into an absolutely inanimate object, into a submissive, trembling thing that is simply used for its direct biological purpose. In this fantasy, she gets rid of the need to be a good, understanding, and responsive partner who must care about your male ego and your high feelings every second. When she is mentally pressed against the wall or thrown onto the bed by several heavy bodies, a colossal, suffocating burden of moral duty instantly falls off her. These faceless shadows in her head absolutely do not give a damn if she is tired after work, if she has a headache today, if her figure is perfect, or what mood she is in at the moment. And no matter how wild and unacceptable it sounds to a loving, civilized husband, it is this primal ruthlessness and this complete unconditional objectification that is the highest form of psychological freedom for her. In this fantasy, she does not need to simulate passion if she does not feel it. She does not need to squeeze words of love out of herself because an inanimate thing does not know how to love, as a thing is simply taken and used for its intended purpose. She languishes with the desire to feel like a puppet, an obedient instrument that is roughly but virtuously pulled by the strings of ancient reflexes, forcing her body to respond against her will and against her conscious desire. Understand a simple thing. When you ask permission for every touch in your real bedroom, when you are too tenderly interested if she feels good, you are shifting the responsibility for this sex onto her again and again. You force her to be the main architect of the process. You force her to control the situation, from which she is already deadly tired all day long. But the crowd in her fantasy never asks questions. The crowd simply uncompromisingly takes its own, depriving her of even a minimal ghostly chance for resistance or hesitation. She rests in this imaginary forced submission. Her brain, inflamed by household routine, finally quiets down because when your body is firmly fixed by strange, ruthless hands, you simply have no resources left in your head to think about unwashed dishes or unpaid bills. This craving for total devaluation of her own personality in bed is not a psychiatric pathology and not a sign that she has fallen out of love with you. It is a cry for help from her crushed female nature, which is slowly suffocating in the sterile, predictable cleanliness of your correct marriage. But does all this mean that tomorrow morning she will secretly go looking for adventures in dirty back alleys? Or that one evening she will ask you to call a couple of your strong friends into your bedroom? In 99% of cases, the answer is categorically no, because her daytime consciousness is too strongly bound by social fear and morality, and she values the financial and emotional security you guarantee her too much. However, this animal hunger, this gaping black hole in her subconscious, will not disappear by itself. It will slowly corrode her from the inside, making her more irritable, cold, and distant in real life with you over the years. She will look at you and subconsciously hate you for being too correct, too safe, and too understandable, and for the fact that you cannot give her this saving, dirty chaos. And here we come close to that very moment of truth, for the sake of which we have traveled this difficult, painful psychological path through the wilds of Carl Jung and animal biology. The time has come to reveal the secret that I promised you from the very first second of our conversation. That very ultimate tool that will take you out of the pitiful category of a convenient neighbor and forever return you to the pedestal of a primal, all-powerful predator. We are moving on to the main course, to that very sign of absolute dominance which will turn your understanding of your own role in the family upside down. You listened as I destroyed the illusion of your family idol step by step and layer by layer, showing you the gloomy, unsightly underside of her hidden desires. And now you stand before the most important question. How can one single person, a loving husband, give her what in her inflamed fantasies only an aggressive crowd can do? The paradox of absolute power lies precisely in the answer to this question. It is a secret used by men whose women never lose animal attraction to them, even after 30 years of marriage. Remember this as the main commandment. To satisfy this perverse, many-faced hunger of her shadow, you categorically, under no circumstances, should try to translate this fantasy into reality and invite other men into your bed. If you do this, you will show not the breadth of your views, but your total male weakness. It will be your capitulation and your voluntary renunciation of the exclusive dominant right to her flesh. The secret lies not in the number of people, but in the amount of energy. You need to become multiple yourself. You need to learn to contain the rage, pressure, and aggression of an entire army, destroying that very bland predictability that is slowly killing her. The main problem of a nice guy and an aging husband is that he is always the same. He is frozen like a bronze statue in one single comfortable archetype of a reliable provider and a calm family man. But in order to become a crowd for her, you must learn to instantly and without the slightest warning break this pattern by changing your internal roles, becoming for her every time an unpredictable, insurmountable force with a completely different handwriting. Tonight, you can be that very gentle, understanding husband who pours her wine, strokes her hair, and listens carefully to the story of her difficult day. But tomorrow, when she least expects it, when she is relaxed and thinks she has completely calculated you, you must turn into a completely strange, ruthless man who takes what is his without the slightest remorse and long conversations about high matters. You need to learn to change your physics, change the density of your gaze, the strength of the grip of your hands, and the very geometry of your movements in your bedroom or outside of it. If you usually start with long, neat kisses and routine caresses, break this boring scenario. Pin her to the wall when she just walks past in the corridor. Fix her wrists so hard that she physically feels your absolute superiority with every cell of her skin. At that very moment, you cease to be that cozy, predictable husband. You become for her that very first aggressive male from her hidden fantasy who does not ask for permission but ultimately takes what belongs to him by the right of the strong. The day after tomorrow, you must become an absolutely cold, detached dominant who uses her body silently and methodically, forcing her to obey your short commands, turning her into that very submissive thing she so desperately dreams of in her secret dreams. A few days later, you can become chaotic, rough, and animalistic, someone who tears clothes off without caring if they tear, someone whose breath burns her neck and whose hands leave light marks reminding her of who is really the master of the situation here. The essence of this phenomenon is to create the effect of complete spatial and emotional filling so that your unpredictability works on her subconscious like the effect of a sudden attack by a whole pack. When she does not know which of your internal characters will enter the room tonight, when she is in a suspended state of primal trembling every second, her body receives that very multiple concentrated dose of adrenaline and testosterone. She no longer needs to close her eyes and imagine the faceless shadows of other men, because you alone give her such a colossal spectrum of aggression, dominance, and animal chaos that completely covers the needs of her starved shadow. Carl Jung called this the integration of the shadow. You do not just allow her inner demon to come out. You meet him with your own primal male core which you have been hiding for so long and so diligently behind the mask of a nice, convenient guy. Your main task is to break this vicious circle of domestic safety. You must roughly tear her out of the state of the manager of your joint life and throw her into the arena of pure instincts where she has neither status nor the right to vote, but only unconditional submission to your power. This paradox of absolute power consists in the fact that the harder you take control away from her in moments of physical intimacy, the more you objectify her, turning her into a submissive instrument of your pleasure, the stronger and more devotedly she becomes attached to you in real life. Because you become the only man in this refined world who is able to withstand her shadow, who is not afraid of her inner dirt, and who gives her that long-awaited psychological vacation from the need to be a strong personality. You fill all her mental and physical space with yourself so tightly and so categorically that there is simply not a single free millimeter left in her head for fantasies about someone else. She gets her crowd, she gets her animal submission, and she gets her long-awaited chaos. But the source of this chaos is only you, her legal husband, who finally remembered that he is first and foremost a primal predator and only then a provider and a family man. That is how real power returns. That is how the deaf walls of long-term indifference are destroyed. And that is how your exemplary wife, tired of everyday life, becomes an insatiable hot female again, who looks up at you with deep animal adoration. Today, we have opened up a very difficult, uncomfortable truth, which may seem too radical to many for the usual vanilla understanding of marriage. But it is this truth that saves relationships flying into the abyss. And now, I have the main question for you men who have gone through decades of family life and seen all its stages with your own eyes. Have you noticed from your personal experience or the experience of your immediate circle how true female sexuality changes with age? And do you agree that the absolute domestic predictability of a nice guy kills passion faster and more reliably than any betrayal? Share your toughest thoughts, observations, and life stories in the comments below this video. Let us collect real male experience and collective wisdom so that other men can see the real picture without pink glasses and false illusions.